future hold for you on Medium? I feel this is a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. With some of the changes that's happened over the past 12 to 18 months and what Tony's announced for the future, are you on Medium for the long term?
I am. And in further response to your question, I was just thinking about this and I was going to make a joke. Well, I can still make this joke. It's kind of funny. I want to become a fellow publication czar like you are. So I want to be very established as someone who people can come to and feel like they, even if they're new, they'd be comfortable coming to one of my publications and publishing their work. I actually have a few people who I've already taken on under my publication family who mainly write for me, which is kind of nice. It feels good. I want to continue strengthening the growth in my publications because there's definitely still a lot of room to grow there. I'm definitely excited to stay on with you for the long haul. I don't see myself leaving New Writers Welcome anytime soon.
That's
like I absolutely revel in the help that I get to give over there. Like, it's amazing. Let's see. I'm definitely going to continue writing personal stories. I think that's where my niche is going to lie, even though it's not really a niche because it can still be a range of topics. But I love telling stories about my life.
Yeah.
I want people to know that they're not alone. If there's something they can relate to that I've written, I want that to be like a clear message going forward that the work that I'm putting out there is for anyone who could take anything from what I've experienced and what I've learned and apply it to their own life. Like, I'm not going to claim to know that I know everything because I don't. Even though it's funny that I mentioned that because, like, I used to be called a know-it-all when I was younger. They're like, you're so smart. You're such a know-it-all. And I'm like, I think as I've gotten older, I just don't care anymore. I'm like, well, I used to be so focused on trying to learn everything and know everything. And now at this point, I'm just like, I'm going to know what I know and I'm always going to want to learn.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that because I am not well educated at all, but what I do know is that nobody can tell a personal story like I can. Because
you're great at that. I feel such a connection.
I'm the main character in that. So I always find it, I touched on this, I think with Art Bram, I don't necessarily find it easy writing personal stories. Sometimes I'm literally sat here quite upset writing them, but I find that they flow easy because it's true to life. This is what happened, you know. So yeah, I haven't written a lot of personal stories lately, and there's reasons behind that.
Yeah.
But I fully intend to do a lot more in the future. But it's just really interesting. And one thing I was going to ask you, again, I touched on this with Art as well. Writing a personal story, do you find that therapeutic? Do you find it difficult to write? Does it bring out pain? Does it bring out sadness or happiness? What are you kind of, I know I'm generalizing because each one might be different, but generally when you're writing personal stories, what do you get out of it? What are your feelings? Just give me your thoughts on that.
I think for me, since historically I haven't been a very, like, in the past, I haven't been very communicative of like my inner, like, trauma, my inner pain, just my feelings in general. And I tend to have bottled up a lot over time. I think writing that is cathartic because I think what ends up happening is that I remember the trauma, but I'm bringing it up in a constructive way to where I'm putting it down on paper so that I can see it for the future and that other people can read it and understand what I've been through. And I think it helps me process those emotions a little better since I've put them down on paper and communicated them. I think it does bring back some of the pain sometimes. It is difficult at times to do it. And it definitely can be emotionally and physically exhausting. But at the end of the day, I think it does more good than harm. I think getting that out there letting people see what I've been through, letting people know the lessons I've learned from what has happened is definitely worth the time and the pain that I have to go through to get it out there.
Which has been your favorite article that you've written, and why?
Ooh. Out of 750 stories, huh? Let's see.
That one,
How?
that one that has either touched you when you've written it, or it's possibly your most successful, and that's why it's particularly good for you. Or
I'll start
maybe,
with my most, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll start with my most successful one. And it was one that I kind of wrote from my heart because it had happened right after this sports player had hit a major milestone in a sport that I really love. It was when Albert Pujols hit his 700th career Major League Baseball home run. And I wrote a story about him hitting that home run and being in exclusive company with only 3 other players, and um, just the memories that I had of his playing career over time,
yeah,
and stuff that I included that was a little more personalized to how I processed his career. And that story was released a couple months ago. That was when he broke the record, and that story got over 56,000 views.
wow,
So that was my most highest performing story of all time. And I looked at that, I was like, wow, a lot of people can relate to this, I suppose. Seeing him break the record and then bringing up those memories, maybe those were shared memories with other people that they wanted to read about too, and celebrate in the moment that this legendary player who's a future Hall of Famer is going as it's happening. So it was just kind of nice to get that kind of validation with getting that many people to relate to my story on that level.
it's
Um,
it's amazing, isn't it, when you get something like that? If you think to myself, okay, why can't every article be like
right.
that?
And then my first viral one, which actually stands out to me a lot, was my introduction to my tiny home living that I
Yeah.
actually wrote for Allison's publication.
Mm.
And that one to date now has about 8,000 views. It hasn't really grown in the last year, but when it first came out, it blew up. It just people just started reading it, and I was like, wow, people really want to know about this. They want to know how I make it work, living in a truck basically that I converted into a house. So I thought that was really cool.
So, Gerald, obviously we or you talked about some personal stuff, growing up, and your situation, and coming out, and you spoke about your sister a little bit, and about that relationship not being so good, and how your mum, I guess, come full circle, and from disowning you, I think the word you used, to accepting, and loving Mike as she absolutely should. You didn't mention much about your dad. Can I ask, what's the
Yeah.
relationship with your dad at the moment?
Um, at this point, it's pretty non-existent. For a long time before that, it was very complicated and very traumatic. There's a lot to unbox here, so if I sound a little long-winded, I apologize. And the last time I talked about my dad with my partner, I actually broke down and started crying. So expect that if I get into a certain sensitivity about certain things, but I'm gonna try to keep my composure here because I'd like to think I'm pretty good at that. Um, so when my dad and I were really close when I was younger. Like I used to do everything with my dad. He would take me on like wherever he would go after work. Like he'd come home. He'd work full time, so my mom would always be home with us. She was the homemaker. She made sure we were fed, we got to school, all that stuff. And my dad he was a good provider. He worked, and like sometimes after work he would come home late because he'd like to drink. He was an alcoholic, but he kind of hit it to the point where he was functional. He was a drug addict. We didn't really see that at home. he didn't bring that home, so that was a good thing too. So we thought it was normal growing up. It got worse as we got older. So when I was still living with my mom and my parents after the age of 18, which is when some of the stuff started going down, I started to notice his drug use a lot more, his alcohol abuse, just his verbal abuse of the people around him, especially more towards my mom as he got older. Um, I felt like I had to protect my mom as the oldest sibling because I have only one other brother and one other sister, and I was the eldest out of the three. And my dad started doing irrational things as he became more and more into drugs. And then I'm not saying the irrational part was when he came out, because he came out as gay and then eventually left my mom a little while after that. But he actually this is hard to talk about. I went to therapy for this. He sexually assaulted me one night, and it was when I was coming home from the club myself. I'd also started to explore my sexuality at that point, and I was at a gay club. I didn't tell anybody. This was when I was a little bit younger, but I didn't. At the time, I wasn't like fully into that. I'd still been dating girls and everything, but I wanted to try it out because I had just gone through a painful breakup with the ex I'd mentioned earlier, and I enjoyed myself. I got really drunk and a little high, like marijuana.
Mm.
I don't know if I can say that in this interview, but I
Yeah, that's
mean,
fun. Yeah, yeah.
okay. I came home really inebriated, intoxicated, and my dad took advantage of that. And at one point during the encounter, I actually wanted to gain his approval through this. So I was, even though I was unwilling, I was a willing participant in parts of this. But then I knew that if I let it get past a certain point, I would never be able to live it down, especially knowing that he had HIV. So I told him to stop when he said that he wanted me to have sexual relations with him. So I did. I stopped when he said he wanted to put something. You know, I don't have to be too
Yeah,
explicit with
yeah,
it.
yeah, of course.
I said, no, Dad, you're drunk, you're high, whatever it is. Go to bed. I am not doing this with you. I love you, and I can't deal with this right now. And I went to bed. I said, maybe when I wake up, he'll forget that this happened, or whatever. Like, I just couldn't. I was in disbelief. Like, this was a man I trusted my whole life who had never done
Of
anything like
course,
this to
of
me.
course.
And I mean, he'd been suspected of doing this to younger kids in our neighborhood when we were growing up, and I was surprised at that. And I said, "Why would you slander my dad's name like that? Why would you say that he was molesting little boys and stuff?" And when it got to that point that day when it happened, I actually started to think maybe they were right. Like, if he would do that to his own son, what would stop him from doing it to a random little? We've never figured it out, and I don't want to. I don't want to criminally like implicate my dad in something that he may or may not have done. But thinking about it now, if he was capable of doing this to his own son, somebody who loved and trusted him, who knows what he could have done? That's my take on it. And then after that, our relationship got really complicated and rocky. I would go years sometimes without talking to him. He moved out of our house after that, and when he left my mom for his boyfriend. Um, then he became more reclusive when his boyfriend died. Because his boyfriend died, he had AIDS. Um, and then he just stopped talking to everyone. And he was so heavily medicated. He wasn't the same man that I'd known growing up. He was so withdrawn. Um, Whenever he would be in a lucid state, when he would be clear, he would ask me for things. He would use my position as his son to feel like he could take advantage of me and ask me for things, knowing that I would possibly give in. But after what had happened with him that time, I drew the line. I had to set a boundary there. And for years, he blamed me for the dissolution of his marriage because I was the one who proactively got involved. got between my mom and my dad. He wanted to stay with my mom and live this double life after I had discovered before she found out that he was sleeping with other men while they were married. Like I'm the one who found this out. I did all the digging and I found all these things that he had done behind my mom's back, and I blackmailed him basically. I threatened to tell him my mom if he didn't back off. I mean, and blackmail's a strong word because like I was put in a difficult position there finding this stuff out. It's not like what was I going to do with this information? Like, and is it even in the place of a kid who gets this information and finds this out about their own dad not to inform their mom about it? Like, they're both my family, but at the same time, if he's not living authentically, like, do you get what I'm saying, Robert? Like, kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
I was put
it's
in a very, very difficult position.
yeah. Can I ask when
Yeah.
the instant you said about coming from the club, how old were you then? I'm assuming you were over 18.
I was over 18. I
Yeah,
was 22, 23.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's,
And I've tried reconnecting with my dad several times since. I've put in my mind that I've forgiven him for those things that he did because I did find out later he was high on methamphetamine when he was doing that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to connect with him again because he is dying. He's HIV positive and he's been living with it for over 25 years, but he's getting older and his meds, just all these things. He's got all these ailments. Actually, wait, no, he's in his 70s now. Wait, no, no, no. That's not right. 64. My dad's 64. But
um, has your
yeah,
dad ever said sorry?
no. And I've tried reaching out to him. Like I've texted him recently, like in the last few months, saying that maybe I could have been a better son. Maybe we could have worked this out differently. Like, is there a way that you would even consider just talking to me right now? Because we haven't talked in like 5 years.
What's your desire to talk to your dad? I'm sitting here thinking, and obviously not being involved in any of this,
Yeah.
haven't gone through the traumatic experience that you've gone through.
Yeah.
And maybe this is my old character coming out a little bit. I guess I've always still had it. But my first thought is I'd batter my dad. That and that's just me hearing about the story.
Yeah.
But you seem to want to connect with him.
I
Is that a good
I
thing? Is
think
that a bad thing? I don't know. But
I think I want to overcome the guilt I still feel.
guilt.
I feel guilty for
There's no guilt on your part, Gerald. No guilt on your part. Mate, I wish I could jump through this camera and give you a big hug. There's no guilt. There can't be.
my dad. I mean, he's still my father. Okay.
Oh.
I know he's done some bad things. I know he's put our family through a lot. I'm so much like my father, Robert.
From what I know of you, Gerald, you're nothing like your dad.
I mean, I'm
You're
talking about like all the good traits from him. He wasn't always a bad man.
yeah, yeah.
I even look like him, even though he's white and I'm brown. Like I'm like a brown version of my father.
You any of the good points that your father had, take those with with both hands. But again, I say this with extremely limited knowledge. But Gerald is Gerald, you know, from the person that I know, and I know you in a limited capacity, you've got a heart of gold. You've got a lot of love to give. You're definitely considerate. You're definitely objective. And I don't believe the person I'm talking to now, even if they were high or not, would carry out those, I'll call them acts, would carry out those sort of acts. So I pray that you are able to get through this and don't judge yourself on your father. You're the main character in your story, and you're like Gerald. Yes, you'll carry some of your dad's DNA. I'm pleased, obviously, you'll carry your mum's DNA as well. And just because your father perhaps didn't lead the life that he should have or could have, doesn't mean to say you should be tarred with that same brush. And again, I'm amazed at the strength that you have. You know, I wanted to ask you something else, which is another personal story. I might leave it for a few minutes first, but I'm glad that you mentioned earlier, I'm glad that you've sought some help, and I hope that you continue to do that, because a mother and a father is there to protect the child, regardless of the children's age. They're there to protect, support, and make that person feel loved. And it's clear that your father didn't give you that structure, and I'm sorry that you didn't have that, because you should have. You deserve to have as well.
Thank you.
Okay, my friend, let's take a pause there for a second. Gerald, thank you for opening up. I can tell that was very hard for you, and I appreciate you being so honest and possibly going down a route that you didn't necessarily want to go down. So I thank you for that. I wanted to come on to something a little bit different. Of course, we know, the audience don't, but we know that we were going to do this conversation a couple of days back, and you had some unfortunate news with your accommodation you're living in. I wanted to touch on that because I think it's kind of important and relevant. So just tell us what happened and what the situation is at the moment.
Sure. So we were on our way back to Erie about a little over a week ago, because we needed to get back to get some packages that we had over at the at our mailbox that we have our address at. Mike got a new laptop that he still hasn't gotten. I have some new headphones for my computer, and we had some mail that we had to check. And we thought we were ready to go that day. We left, but there was a really bad windstorm. The wind was blowing up to, let me see, how do I say this in UK terms? 80 kilometers per hour, something like that, maybe 90.
Okay.
The winds got really bad. Well, I'm going to say 60 for the American viewers. 60 miles per hour. It was really strong. The winds were so bad. We were driving in that, and our truck is big. It's a 14-foot box truck, so it's 14 feet long, about 11 feet off the ground. So we're getting a lot of that wind resistance. So we were, going side to side. At one point, our hood even flew up because we don't have the latch on the hood. We have to tie it down. And the wind was so strong, it broke the latch. Wow. And it almost hit our windshield. And we thought we were going to have to replace our windshield again. Well, we kept going. We kept taking breaks as we were going down this 20-mile path that we had to get down, half an hour to get over to the truck stop so that we could stop. But we ended up breaking down in the middle of nowhere once our engine just lost power, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. We looked inside and we found out our head gasket had blown, which is a costly repair and also a very inconvenient repair. But if you can do it yourself, if you can get the hole small enough in the gasket to cover it with some sort of chemical or like a minor repair, you can go on it a little bit longer. But there were other problems because when we were towed back to that truck stop we were on our way to, we had the guy tow us over to where we wanted to go, and he didn't disengage our drive shaft. So it messed up our transmission too, and it's led to other problems in our engine. So it's going to cost thousands and thousands to fix all the stuff we need to fix on this on our box truck, obviously our home. And now we're in the middle of we're not in Erie right now. We're actually in Buffalo, New York, and we're just stuck here until we can get more money. And I don't know how long we can be here for real. Like, it seems like they're okay with us for now. We've been here about a week, a little over, and they haven't talked to us yet. But I don't know. It's always a possibility.
Yeah.
It's always a possibility that somebody's just gonna overstep their bounds and come over and say, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?"
So, I mean, how are you gonna, how are you gonna resolve this issue? Because it sounds like there's quite a lot of money involved in your home and your transport.
Well, we found an RV. We found an
Okay.
RV that we can buy from somebody. It's going to be $1,000. I can get that money somehow next week. I might need to raise some of it, but I can definitely pay for it after next Tuesday when we get a little money in. So we're going to go down to Erie, get a rental car, drive down, get the RV, bring it back up to Buffalo. And then we're going to stay in a hotel for a little bit so that we can successfully just transfer everything out of our old home into the new home. But we just have to make sure everything before then stays in place. Like, we're able to still stay here until I can get paid, or if I can get money before then. There's just a lot to consider right now. And at one point I thought we were going to be stuck in the water and that they're going to make us leave, that we wouldn't have anywhere to stay. So it was a little worrying to me, especially not being in a place where we could tap into resources with like friends or family or anything. We're far away from all that.
Wow. You've had a lot going on, isn't there? A lot going on. Going back to Medium just a little bit, actually. I know you've got like so many friends and followers and acquaintances and so on and so forth. But if I'm going to limit you, as I guess we're probably coming towards the end of our conversation now. Do you want to give a few shout outs to maybe some writers? One of the things that I love about these conversations is that, yes, my YouTube channel really is about the Medium platform, but we get the chance to go behind the scenes, behind the cameras, if you like, and really get to know people like yourself, the writers that we love and adore, and the stories, and we get to meet the men and women behind the articles. It's one of the things that I really wanted to evolve in when I did the interview series on Medium. It's something I wanted to evolve in, going behind the scenes as such. And this is a really good example of why I started doing this, because I found that probably in the last, I don't know how long it's been now, probably 3 hours we've been talking. It's been such worthwhile for me, and I really hope that a lot of people get a lot of enjoyment getting to know you as a person. I think that's really, really important, and I'm sure that people will gravitate towards you more, having known a little bit more about you. So I just really wanted to thank you for the conversation. But before we head off, have you got any questions for me?
Yeah, I do. I
Okay.
do. I've read so many of your stories, Robert. I've been so fascinated with the parts of your life that you do get to share with us.
Okay.
And I was really pleased yesterday to hear that you got to celebrate your youngest daughter's birthday. She
Yes,
had
with
just turned
5.
5. Yeah. So I know you'd written in the past that it took you a while and it was hard for you to learn how to love your youngest daughter.
Yes.
Can you explain to some of us out here like what your process was when you were able to finally get to that point?
I will try. So yeah, I have three children. I mentioned my wife Laura, but I've agreed with Laura I wouldn't speak about my children's names. But I've got a
Yeah, yeah.
21-year-old, I've got a 5-year-old just turned, and I've got a younger daughter that's 3 in
Oh,
March.
so that's your older daughter.
That was my older daughter yesterday. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So my youngest daughter, yeah, I basically I had such a happy life. Me, Laura, and my oldest daughter, we were like 3 peas in the pod, the 3 musketeers, and we were inseparable, unbreakable. She wasn't planned. My wife was very keen to have another child so that my oldest had something to play with. So my third child, I guess, my youngest daughter was planned. And I was kind of okay with it up until the point when she was born, and she was delivered, and I felt I didn't want to. I felt guilty. I felt like a traitor. Um, I I didn't even want to hold her. All I could think about, my wife has just gone through delivering a child. I've got a helpless child, wrapped up in the state that children are born in, let's say. And all I could think about was my oldest daughter at home. And I was upset. And I guess everyone else thought I was upset because my new daughter was born. I was actually upset because I felt guilty that my oldest daughter was at home and I was with her sister. So I could probably spend hours talking about that situation. It is the hardest story I've ever written, and I will never write a harder story as far as I'm concerned. My relationship with her is completely different now. I actually worship the ground she walks on. I
Oh,
think I remember being on holiday and my in-laws were with me. Laura's really tired and up in bed. My in-laws kept trying to give me the baby. And I was kind of, no, I'll go wake Laura up. She'll change the nappy or whatever. I wouldn't even change the nappy. I wouldn't do anything with her, wouldn't feed her. I was really,
oh,
and it's not her fault, but that's just how I felt. I needed some help, but I needed to start by helping myself. It wasn't my youngest fault. It wasn't her fault. She didn't ask to be brought into the world. I'll probably never get rid of that guilt, and I don't deserve to get rid of that guilt either. I shouldn't have acted that way. My wife thinks it was a bit of postnatal depression. Possibly it was. So I don't know when it turned. I think it was a little bit like Ivy. She grew on me over time rather than it was just,
oh,
I love her now, which I do. I think it was
yeah.
just Ivy. I just think it probably took, I can't remember, probably 9 to 12 months for me to start bonding with her. So it's incredibly difficult because I know that one day she might read that article, and I deserve everything I get when she does read it. But I needed to release, and that was the easiest way for me to release, was to write that story. So I don't know whether that answered your question or
Wow.
not.
I was gonna say, because she's 3 now. I was gonna say, if it were me and my dad, because I could read it 3. The joke is I would have already read it. But anyway, we could cut that out. But no, the next part I was gonna ask you is because I'm really fascinated at how well you are at marketing yourself and how marketing your publication and everything. Do you have a background in that? Is that what you do outside of Medium? Is that like your line of work?
I have done a lot of jobs. I've done an incredible amount of jobs. I mean, what I currently do now, I'm a commercial director for a hot tub and swimming pool company. So we sell a brand you'll know, Jacuzzi.
Yeah.
We sell 3 different brands of hot tubs, but Jacuzzi is our premium brand. And our hot tubs go from about, I don't know what it would be in dollars, but from about £7,000 up to about £25,000.
Wow. Higher end.
Yeah, yeah. Our swimming pools go from about 50K to about 500K. And so that's the kind of world that I delve into. So, but previous to that, I've worked in sales. Yes, I have. I've never really worked in marketing, but I have owned businesses myself, and so I've had to market those businesses. I used to work in the bodybuilding world, and I had a lot of people who I sponsored, and I had to market them. So I guess I have marketed to a degree. The most difficult thing I have found is being on camera. I don't like being on camera. But I got over that when a friend of mine, Christina, God asked me to do a little YouTube, a little video for her Kickstarter boot camp, and it kind of went from there. Erica Marie played a part in that as well, with the interview series. That's kind of where my interview series came from. I was copying what she did. She interviewed me, and it was brutal. And
I remember that interview.
Yeah, it was
I remember
brutal.
that interview.
And I thank her for that, because one, she gave me the inspiration, and two, she gave me the confidence. And obviously she's a fellow editor now. So yeah, background in marketing, a little bit, not as a full-time job. But I do have a little bit of a sales background. So yeah.
Another question I wanted to ask you, because you're very vulnerable and you seem you're, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm not trying to word this a certain way to make it sound like it's an insult, because it's not. But you're a very sensitive person, and I can see that, and it reflects in your writing.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that helps you when you write? Like, what do you think exactly? Like, the just your nature. Like, how do you feel that gives you an advantage? And when you go on Medium and write your personal stories, or just whatever story comes to your mind.
Yeah. When I spoke about my dad a little bit. My dad was a very, very, very hard man. He had no compromise. It was his way. You live under my roof. It's my rules. What I say go. If I tell it to jump, you ask me how high. He was very much a disciplinarian. But on the flip side of that, he was a bit Jekyll and Hyde, because my dad was a funny man. He used to come out with one-liners. You would just laugh your socks off. He was so funny. My mum was the complete opposite. She was quite serious. My mum was a businesswoman. My mum worked very, very hard. My dad retired at 42, I believe, through ill health. My mum was a workaholic. I guess I'd probably take that off her. My mum was very passive, passive. You know, if you'd walked in and bumped into her, she would say sorry for you bumping into her. She was very passive. So I think I've got elements of both of my parents. when it comes to writing and being vulnerable, I'll be honest, when I'm writing something personal that emotionally gets me, well, the word sensitive you used, actually, if I'm sensitive towards the story, I really don't give a toss about how it sounds. I'm just really almost venting a little bit of frustration onto pen and paper, or keyboard as it is now. And sometimes I'm writing and my wife will come down and say, it's 2 a.m, get to bed. And I'm like, I've got to finish this article. She's like, bloody medium, just get to bed. I'm like, I've got to finish this. Because if I don't finish it now, I won't do it the story justice. I've got to finish it now. So I try and make sure if I'm going to write something like that, that I've got a good hour or two to dedicate to that arc, and I don't want to be interrupted. So I generally do them late at night if the kids and my wife are in bed, so that I can fully concentrate on what I'm doing. That sometimes doesn't help because I'm more emotional in the night when I've got time to think. I tend to be on the way home from work. I think a lot about my family, and I'm guilty. I'm not home again to put my kids to bed and things like that. So I think a lot on the way home from work or late at night. If I don't stay up late every night, but if I'm up late writing, that's when I tend to get emotional. Christmas is an awful time of year for me because I miss my parents so much, and I know you can't see, but I've got the Christmas tree up at the moment, which I put up today, and the lights, and it's been quite an emotional day for me. So I had a very fortunate upbringing, and it sounds horrible. When I'm writing a personal story, I'm doing it for me, not for the reader. That might sound callous, but that's the truth. I'm doing it for me.
I don't think that sounds horrible. Yeah, personally, I don't think that sounds horrible. I think that's very similar to how I feel when I approach those type of stories. But at the same time, I do still try to give a little bit of a nugget, like we were talking about earlier, just a little bit. If somebody can even relate to a tenth of what I'm writing,
yeah,
it's worth it.
Yeah.
So I totally get it.
It's my therapeutic side, I think, but particularly if it's about, law. I tend to write some funny stuff, and I've done some poems and that, and taken the mick, and she loves it. I mean, she I love her with all my heart, and she knows that, and I'm very fortunate to have her, because I think some of the content that I write, if I had married a different woman, I might be in a lot of trouble. But if I write something like that, I let her have a read of it, and sometimes she struggles. But as long as I don't mention the kids' names, then that's our agreement, if you like.
So is Laura and your family, was that the inspiration for you to start that What Is Love to You publication? Or where did you find the inspiration to start that one? Because I know that was your second publication.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna laugh at this, really. I'm greedy, and P.S. I Love You closed, and I thought, well, there's not another great publication about love out there, so I'm going to be the next P.S. I Love You. And it's majorly flopped. But that was it. I wanted to be P.S. I Love You Mark II. And that's why I came up with the concept of What Is Love to You. Also, because I can write a half decent story on love. So the truth is, I expected What Is Love to You to catch up and overtake New Writers Welcome fairly quickly, and it just hasn't panned out that way.
I think over time, you just have to give that one a little more time. I think people will start to understand what you're truly trying to do there, as time goes on. Because with the editors that you have there now, like Lucy and Marilyn and Gabby, those women are they're incredible. They'll help you take that publication to new heights.
They're passionate. Lucy's been probably my biggest supporter since day one. and I've got a
I
very,
love Lucy.
I've got
She's
a great
amazing.
connection with Lucy. She's my bestie.
Oh,
Me and Lucy connect 2-3 times a week. Wrote her an email before I come on tonight. So yeah, Lucy's really special to me.
same here. Like I've only known her a little less time than you have, and she's recently seen some of my work and what I've published in What Is Love Too when I did the response to her holiday challenge in
Yes.
there, and she was blown away by what I had written. She's like, "Wow, you're like we were both getting emotional when we were
Yeah.
interacting back and forth." She was just, yeah, she's such a sweetheart
She's special. She's special. I mean, Marilyn,
for
of course,
sure.
was one of my original editors, and of course was on both of my publications. Now she focuses
Yeah,
on What Is Love to You, and yeah, Marilyn has been incredible for me and very supportive, which is great. Gabby's taking a break from Medium at the moment. She got some stuff going on, so she's
yeah,
not on Medium at the moment. But yeah, I miss her too.
but she'll be back. Yeah.
It's been an absolutely wonderful conversation. I wish it wasn't ending. And even if we don't do it for YouTube purposes, it'd be nice to connect again in the future on Zoom as well. I've really enjoyed our chat together. So I appreciate your time. You're a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you for spending many hours with me this evening or this afternoon, where you are. And I shall speak to you very soon, my friend. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you too, friend. It was definitely a pleasure.